Hey, Matt Minster here with my trusty assistant. Sorry?
I'm Suzanne, the Magnificent, and this is my trusty assistant, Matt.
That's right. And we're here with easy tips that can save you energy and money.
Like magic.
Adjusting your thermostat 7 to 10 degrees for 8 hours a day can save you up to 10% a year. And a smart thermostat can change the temperature automatically.
Abra Adjusto.
Impressive.
There's more where that came from.
LED light bulbs use up to 80% less energy and can last 25 times longer than regular light bulbs.
Ooh. Ah.
And using timed outlets can help you save even more energy.
Tickety-tockety-two.
Or try Smart Plug. Now these cool devices sync with your smartphone so that you can manage your energy
Ta-da!
with the touch of a finger. Hey, you're pretty good at that.
Thanks. Want to see another trick?
Of course.
Energy savings made easy.
Find more tips at AmeronIllinois.com/savings made easy.
And hello again, everybody. I'm Bob Ramsey, your host for the Keith Costas podcast. And there's the star of the show, Keith Costas, MLB Network analyst. Keith, how are you today?
I'm good, Rammer. How you doing?
I am doing great. As each week goes, interesting week. There's always something new in baseball. And, you know, a lot of the guys that have been around the game, they say every night you see something new at the ballpark. And we've seen some really fascinating things going on. And the way teams have juxtaposed their spots in the lineup, who's hot, who's not, in just 1 month of play has been pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's obviously a lot of manipulation going on, especially on the pitching side of things coming off of the shortened season. Ken Rosenthal had a great article this morning about how injuries are on the rise, which I think everyone kind of predicted was going to be the case, but he had some nice numbers to go along with it from some outside consulting firms that kind of put him onto this stuff. They didn't want to reveal who they were working with, but obviously doing some work for the league and some teams, and the injuries are up about 15 to 20% compared to where they were at in April of 2019, obviously the last full season that we played. So, yeah, in addition to the kind of early season, you know, small sample size, hot streak, cold streaks, you've got this kind of new situation to deal with guys coming off of the shortened season that have made things kind of hard to predict. So lots of fluctuations all across the league so far.
Yeah, let's use injuries as kind of our thread through the show today because it's affecting so many teams. And when we talk about the New York Mets, Jacob Degrom misses a start. I think it's a strained lat, but and hopefully this is the kind of thing that he can get under control and get back. But it's just part of the drama going on with the Mets as they fire both hitting coaches, you know, 1 month into the season.
Yeah, with the Mets, I mean, obviously they were a huge story coming into the season with Steve Cohen and getting Lindor and everything they did kind of to overhaul their image and reinvigorate that fan base coming into the season. But if you live up here in New York, I'm not really sure if the Mets fans don't love the losing more than the potential for winning. That kind of Mets, Jets, Islander contingent of fan is quite the self-loathing bunch at times. So sometimes I feel like that fan base almost revels in the drama that tends to swirl around the Mets. And yeah, you said it. It's been something so far. The firing the hitting coaches, obviously they were off to a tough start, but the reaction to that was pretty unbelievable. I mean, Pete Alonso openly talking about crying when he got the news. Lindor, who's been there for obviously only a few months, talking about how he was crushed by the news. And then you mentioned Degrom. I mean, as a Cardinal fan, obviously we're not looking for those type of matchups if we're looking for as many wins as we can. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed that we weren't going to get to see him pitch against the Cardinals this week, especially the original matchup that was supposed to be KK versus Degrom was pretty appealing. But yeah, Degrom goes down. Hopefully it's not anything more than just a brief shutdown. They said he's going to step back for a few days and then reevaluate. Doesn't sound like it's too serious yet, but obviously when you're not scoring runs like the Mets haven't, and then your best pitcher goes down like that, it's cause for concern. And obviously Syndergaard, Carrasco, they've already dealt with some injuries. So things starting to come undone at the seams for the Mets pretty quickly here in what looked like a promising season not that long ago.
Yeah, when you look at the analysis, it's funny. Lindor is struggling a little bit, although he's still drawing walks. And I think that shows that he's not a lost cause, that he's not playing overmatched or in so deep of a funk. And then Alonso's doing well. So coaches don't get credit for Alonso, but do get discredit for Lindor. The drama part of it I think has to do more than just the numbers and the analytics. Had to be something else going on behind the scenes with management.
Yeah, it does seem that way. It just seemed like something was lost in translation there with teams. The team knew that they wanted to make a change, but they couldn't make a change when exactly they wanted to. It drags out for a couple of days. And then you read some of the after the fact reporting. I guess they weren't able to get to the players before some of them got on the bus. There was a thought they'd tell them at the team hotel about the changes, but you know how it is nowadays. You're on your phone in a 5-minute bus ride and the news is broken all over the world on Twitter. So that's never what you want when the team is finding, or the players on the team is finding things out through the media, as you know, Rammer. When has that ever not been a recipe for disaster, whether it's good news, bad news? That's not how players want to find out about things.
No.
So when they're caught off guard like that, and it's a kind of curious decision to begin with. I mean, the Mets had one of the best offensive teams, not just in baseball in the shortened season, but in the history of their franchise. I mean, granted, it was 60 games, so take it with a grain of salt, but that's double the sample size we're talking about here in a bad offensive showing. So same coaches last year led them to one of the best offenses they've had in some time. Half as many games this year, they've suddenly forgot everything they know about teaching hitting, I guess, and they're out the door. So kind of typical Mets fashion. Obviously plenty of time to rebound, but not without the drama that seems to always be in the air in Queens.
Let's go across town to the Bronx with the Yankees, and they'd battled injuries early. Still, Voit and others are still out right now. But as the Astros come to town, the fans really got into it. And, you know, it's interesting. Stanton and maybe a couple of others, I can't recall now, were talking about how the fans really had an impact on the game. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that everyone was kind of looking forward to what this tour would be like for the Astros with fans back in the stands. And obviously Yankee Stadium, regardless of whether or not the Yankees were involved in the stuff that happened back in 2017, the Yankee Stadium is always going to be one of the more hostile environments when it comes to having a little fun with the fans getting after the players and whatnot. But with them being in the crosshairs of what the Astros had going on in the playoffs, they had a lot of pent-up energy. And I think everyone, like I said, was expecting it to be quite the atmosphere, but at least for me personally, it exceeded my expectations, the level of kind of vitriol that was in the stands last night and the energy that even a partial crowd brought to Yankee Stadium. I mean, Jose Altuve was getting absolutely razzed the entire game. You almost feel bad for him because if you read some of the reporting and just kind of read the tea leaves, it sounds like that's not really – he was one of the guys that wasn't really at the forefront of it anyways. That's not the type of hitter that he is. And you know, it's kind of narrative overload. How do we really know without being in the clubhouse? But it certainly seems like he's struggled with the sort of tide turning on this guy who's 5'6", was kind of the darling of the league for a while, a guy everyone can get behind, coming out of nowhere to now the villain and kind of the face of this whole situation with the Astros. So yeah, it was quite the scene at Yankee Stadium last night. But as far as the Yankees in particular, I mean, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, getting off to that slow start, and shocking, they're hitting. The Yankee lineup is hitting. Right. Look at the names. Yeah, Giancarlo Stanton's a pretty good hitter. Judge, LeMahieu, these guys are going to hit, and they finally are. And now the pitching is getting on track too. I think they've won 6 of 7, and their starters are 5-0 in that span. Obviously, Cole's been Cole the whole season, but you get a good turn from Corey Kluber. Some of these other guys get rolling. Their bullpen's been there all year, and that division really hasn't done much behind the Yankees. You know, the Blue Jays, the Rays. Obviously, the Rays coming off of a pennant and the Blue Jays having a lot of expectations with those young players. They're all kind of floating around 500 behind the Red Sox, ironically enough, right now. So the Yankees, I think, are gonna assert themselves as the king of that division here sooner rather than later.
Let's go back to the injury thread and go to Chicago, where the White Sox are just get a real punch in the gut on a couple of injuries. This is offense, not pitching, like we were talking about with the Mets. And I think the front office management's reeling a little bit about what to do.
Yeah, I mean, losing Eloy Jimenez before the season was obviously a tough blow, but they've got other guys in the system that can kind of fill that slugger role with Andrew Vaughn, one of their high draft picks who's just getting going now. But you look at Luis Robert, that's one of the most irreplaceable players in baseball, I think. Maybe, you know, you can find other players to provide. You know, you could go with a sum of the parts type of situation, try and replicate that value. But in terms of that skill set in one guy, there's not many guys that can do what he does. And he's just scratching the surface. You know, he's still striking out a lot. Plate discipline isn't really there, but the raw tools, I'm not sure there's many guys in baseball that are kind of on his level as somebody you're not going to be able to just replicate with one player or even come close to approximating. So, yeah, Tony and that whole group up in Chicago certainly has their work cut out for them without first Jimenez and now Robert. And I mean, they've had Yermin Mercedes as the best hitter in baseball for the first 5-6 weeks of the season.
Yep.
You know, as good of a story as that's been, I think that any reasonable fan would expect that to come back down to earth sooner rather than later. So what's that lineup going to look like missing two, stalwarts that were in there last year, plus the one big surprise that's helped carry him through these first couple weeks? To be determined, but I think much like the NL Central, the AL Central isn't exactly a juggernaut. So maybe they can tread water long enough to compete with, I guess, the Twins when they get things sorted out, assuming that they eventually do. I think it's still the Twins and the White Sox in that division, even with the injuries in Chicago.
And how about their pitcher, Cease, going 3 for 3?
Yeah, how about that, right? Dylan Cease. Yeah, they've got a lot of good young pitchers that have obviously showed well this season. But yeah, Mercedes out of the lineup with no DH, no problem. Just like Tony's old days in the NL, Dylan Cease 3 for 3.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Hey, are you getting a feel at MLB Network regarding after 1 month, La Russa back at the helm? They're after a slow start, they're winning games, and it sounds like it's the same old Tony. I shouldn't say old. Same Tony as before.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the preseason narrative about the age, like we said, he shouldn't just shoehorn him in as old Tony. I think a lot of that was way blown out of proportion, and that's been what you've heard out of that clubhouse so far, is that the guys don't have any problem getting along with him. Now, there have been a couple articles as people kind of write their first month wrap-ups here in these last couple days, a couple nuggets coming out about how maybe he made some strategical errors in the first month, some questionable pinch hitting moves, maybe leaving pitchers in a little too long. And Tony acknowledged some of those things. I mean, he's been out of the game for a long time. It's not like he's forgotten how to do the gig, but maybe a little rusty, still learning his team, I think, is the bigger thing. People want to immediately point to his age or the layoff. He hasn't been around these guys. He's still figuring out the roster. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And they're still in good position in the standings at this early point in the season. So I think generally speaking, there's been some heat from the fan base and in Chicago locally, but talk about what we kind of hear in the walls of MLB Network with our former players and our analysts, a couple guys who played against him and certainly a lot that competed against him. I don't think anything's changed in the way they perceive Tony, and they're still on board with this idea of him being up in Chicago, although it's going to be a topic all year. Yep. I think what you're seeing is the people that thought one thing. I know this is going to shock you where we are in our society. The people who thought one thing in March still think that thing, and the people who thought the opposite still think that thing too. No one's really too interested in changing their mind just yet.
And let's move west, and talk about the Dodgers, who we all thought were they were the team, not only the team to beat, but that nobody was going to beat them. That they were. They were a juggernaut that was not going to be able to be stopped, and they've stumbled a little bit here. And for me, hey, that's just baseball. You can't, they shouldn't worry about it. Or are there any analytics that are saying, let's take a deeper look at this team?
Well, I think the biggest thing with them, like we've been talking about, is just the injuries. Dustin May goes down the other day, David Price, not that he was going to be a huge piece for them, but pretty nice luxury, which was kind of the theme of the Dodgers season, was look at this depth and this kind of embarrassment of riches they have. David Price is a long man out of your bullpen. He's down, obviously, without Bellinger, a former MVP. Tony Gonsolin, who's been a piece for them, still getting built back up. So they're dealing with injuries just like everybody else. But Rammer, you said it. It's baseball. We did the Cubs game yesterday. We were supposed to have them on Monday night. They got rained out in Chicago. I mean, does it get any more baseball than Clayton Kershaw versus Kyle Hendricks? Kyle Hendricks, a 7.5 ERA, giving up 10 homers on the year. He goes the distance. Kershaw gets knocked out after one inning, the shortest outing of his career. I mean, how are you supposed to predict that? That's how this game works, and we're still only not even 30 games in yet. So, yeah, I mean, they clustered the wins in the beginning, started 13-2. It was tied for the best start in franchise history, even for a juggernaut like the Dodgers. Now they've lost 12 of 16. Add it all up, if they had just started with this record and they were going, 2 losses here, 3 losses there, 4 wins here, no one would think twice about it. But the fact that they had a big streak at the start and now they've stumbled a little bit, people freak out, but way too early to make any kind of judgments. I think that they're still, they are, if you look at the odds in Vegas, they're still a heavy favorite to win the World Series and win the NL pennant. So, yeah, nothing's really changed for me on the Dodgers, although the injury concerns in the rotation are obviously something to keep an eye on.
What's next for MLB Network?
We've actually got a little break here coming up as far as my own personal assignments, as far as games. We had a lot at the start of the season. We'll get back
Yeah.
going with it in a couple of weeks. But next week, we're doing one of our live games kind of in a different style, MLB Tonight style. So instead of having the normal play-by-play man, color man in the booth, we're going to have 4 guys kind of sitting around watching a game like you would with your friends and doing it a little bit of a more casual, laid-back style. So we've got that next week with the White Sox and Tony. So they'll be on the air on Wednesday.
That'll be fun. That will be
Yeah.
a lot of fun. I like that style as a little bit of a change up for folks, and MLB does a great job in finding ways to entertain the audience. That's a good one.
Thanks. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We did one last weekend or 2 weekends ago now with CC Sabathia, which was almost like a laid back of a laid back, even more, a little bit more behind the scenes. And hopefully we'll have more of those coming up too. So yeah, kind of fun to change it up. It's a different world with not being able to travel to these games and do them like we're used to. So if we're going to be in the studio, might as well try something new and give fans a little bit of a different taste.
Keith, thank you very much. That is Keith Costas and the Keith Costas podcast. I'm Bob Ramsey, and we'll see you next time on Claibs Online.